Hey, I'm Daniel Berger, and this is Adventures of a Real Estate Broker. Welcome to the podcast where Metro New York real estate meets great stories and a douse of humor. Forget the dry sales talk. Here we dive into the fun and unexpected moments of real estate. Join me each week as we explore Westchester, Long Island, the Bronx, and more. You'll hear about the people, the places, and the crazy situations that make this industry so interesting. Thanks to our sponsor, Remax Prestige Properties, we're ready to share the lighter side of real estate. Whether you're a pro, a buyer, or just curious, we've got something for everyone. Ready for today's adventure? Let's get into it. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Adventures of a Real Estate Broker. This is Daniel Berger, and we're here today with none other than Dr. Abe Kaplan. I've known Dr. Abe since 1987. That just means we are both so super old. Good job, Abe, with keeping the dark hair, because obviously we both have hair, so that's a good thing.
Hair.
Both have hair. So I've known Dr. Abe since 1987 when we were in a fraternity brothers at Washington University in St. Louis together. Have been friends ever since. And while this podcast is the Adventures of a Real Estate Broker, Dr. Abe is an ophthalmologist. And as we were talking and texting back and forth, I was like, Abe, you must have some interesting stories as well of things that have happened along the way. And obviously, we're not going to violate any HIPAA rules today because that's kind of a thing. But I just thought it would be great to have Abe on the call just to kind of go over stuff, and discuss stuff. Another reason, Abe has always been about the experience. So experiences are so important. I remember driving around in his late model Cadillac in 1987, 88, and we would drive around St. Louis and it would be doing interesting things, like not the things that you would think about doing, but things that were kind of different. And also with the dice, by the way, Abe had the dice in the mirror, in the rear view mirror. But even like when Abe's from Chicago, and a couple times I visited Chicago, and Abe, it was always about the experience. It was always about like, okay, I am not going to show you Chicago that you think Chicago is. I'm going to bring you to the best place to get deep dish pizza, Eduardo's, I believe it was. Are we going to the Wiener Circle? All the different fun spots. Like Abe's, I think, favorite spot in Chicago might have been, I think it's Grant Park, where the water fountain is for Married with Children. That was a Married with
Right,
Children was a show
right.
that just started when we were in school together. But with that's kind of a long introduction, Abe, but I've known you for so long. And with that, Dr. Abe Kaplan, how are you today?
Doing wonderful, Dan. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a great pleasure. First of all, it's a great pleasure just to see you and actually talk to you in a live way where I actually see your face. We're old timers. To me, this is still kind of I know you're more and more with the modern stuff, but for me, just to be able to sit here and talk with you as if we're sitting together is a cool treat. And I'm just doing great, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you here. I'm
Sure.
honored that you invited me to come on here.
You have a good story. So besides that, Abe is always about connections, and that's a lot with real estate. It's about the experience, right? So for me, it's the least about what type of house it is, and is it a colonial? Is it a Tudor? It's really more about how you treat people and how you work with people. So that has to be similar with you as being a doctor, where like the medicine that you're practicing is probably it's certainly important, but there has to be other parts of it, dealing with families, dealing with people and situations. So give an example maybe of interesting things that have happened along the way where you've been surprised or you've been able where it's outside of what somebody would consider a normal doctor, patient relationship.
Well, first of all, if you get into, you're exactly right. It's all about, as corny as it may sound, it's about kind of the relationships. Anybody, and especially nowadays in medicine, there's a lot more and more pressure on us to see more and more people in less and less amount of time. And so a lot of complaints you hear are about doctors that just come in there, don't even make eye contact with the patient, or just typing on their thing. Okay, you need to do this and this. Bye bye. I'm off to the next room. and that's become kind of the way things are nowadays. For me, I have a role model that is my grandfather, actually. The eye chart that you see right behind me here, this was actually my grandfather. I don't know if you knew this. My grandfather was an ophthalmologist in Philadelphia back when I was a little kid. And then he moved to semi-retire to be by the shore by Atlantic City in the 70s, before Atlantic City became the big casino place. And so it's about an hour and a half drive from Philadelphia to there. And he set up a shop, a shop, so to speak, down in the basement of his home, put this thing up there. And he had all these patients that would come an hour and a half each way from Philadelphia to see him back and forth. Not because he was, I mean, yes, he was giving them the good medicine they needed and taking care of their eyes. But it's like you said, they could have seen 100 or more other ophthalmologists between Philadelphia to get to where his house was. And they came to see him for that reason, because of the connection that he made and warmth that he gave off. So for me, that's been something that I really have always admired and that I really always strive to do. And so that's you hit that on the nail. The relationship is at least as important as the business transaction, so to speak, be it in real estate or me in terms of taking care of patients. So,
Well, I do know. So don't, again, we've known each other for over 30 years, getting closer to 40. And I do know that you have your Philadelphia connection. Don't you think I don't listen to you? Because I know, thank God for interleague play in baseball, because it's always been a question of Abe. If the Phillies play the Yankees, who's going to win?
there
So I certainly know that,
you go. That's a little
exact.
inside joke that we won't really get into, but that's a
No,
good
we
one. Yes. Yep.
Okay, but
Yeah.
again, it's from the connections, and it's always about the connectivity. You know, as a real estate agent, people, if I can satisfy somebody, they're going to want to have the same experiences and tell people about it. So I'm assuming that you've been practicing now, and you started in Arizona, but you're back in your hometown of Chicago. Well, you're not in downtown Chicago, but you're a suburb of Chicago. And have you seen that where people are like, you got to come see Dr. A. He's the best and do all that. So I'm assuming you must have lots of patients that are referrals, really.
A lot of patient referrals, a lot of people, word of mouth is still the old fashioned best way to meet people. And I've actually, even in the Chicagoland area, I've gone from years ago working more toward the city. Now I'm kind of from where that office was. I'm myself over an hour away from where I had been previously. And I still to this day have people that, similar to my grandfather, I'm very honored that anywhere I go, they drive an hour and a half each way to see me the same way. And it's all, again, not because of the medicine I gave them. I'm sure to some degree it is. You have to be very competent and do the surgery well that you're doing and things like that. But they tell me they're not going anywhere else. They try, trust is what it's all about. And if you find somebody you trust, you're willing to go wherever you need to find them. And I'm
Yeah,
sure that would be the case for you, I'm sure.
and what I was thinking about before, what are some of the things I want to talk about, Abe? But I would say you're just such a giving person, caring, giving, and loyal. And that loyalty is really testing yourself this year because your beloved Chicago White Sox are potentially on a historic losing run, right? So Sox. But you know what? That's your team. It will always be your team. Clearly, myself as a long-suffering Jets fan, it's been since the 80s, since the Islanders actually won anything. So you stick with your team, and it's the same thing. I'm sticking with my doctor. So,
Go. Yeah.
through thick and thin.
Yeah.
But that is something
Me and
that
me
you're
and
right.
me and the 12 other Sox fans around, we all are very appreciative of you giving the publicity to us. Yes.
It's
Thank
gonna
you, man.
it's gonna be interesting. But by the way, thank you. I remember you brought me to one of the last weeks of a game at Old Comiskey Park.
Right. That
And then
was
I think
cool.
the following year was it Co-America? Is it still Co-America?
That's the one in Detroit. It was
Oh, right.
originally they called it New Comiskey Park, and then now it became U.S. Cellular Field. And now it's actually related to your business. It's a guaranteed rate field.
Okay. Yeah, guaranteed
So,
rate. They're more in New Jersey, but I've definitely seen more of
so
them. So
which is
that's
interesting though, because their logo, which applies well for a mortgage company, their logo on guaranteed rate is an arrow going down,
right.
and
Which
which
actually
is great for a mortgage company. But yeah, when you see that all around the
thumbs
stadium,
down.
it kind of is a foretelling of things to come at the stadium. Yes, going down.
Yeah.
Yep, yep.
That's not
So
really good. You know what's interesting is that I'm assuming I don't know if Oakland's actually switched to their new stadium, but they are making a new stadium. They're playing like at a not even a college stadium, I think. So maybe next year you guys can sell out playing with the A's. I think there's only 3,000 fans or something that are going to be able to see those
exactly.
games.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
But yeah,
but
you were mentioning about going the extra mile and things like that. So, for example, in our field, when we're on call, I'm in a group of other doctors, and then whoever's on call gets the patient calls to the answering service. The answering service has to call in to the whoever's on call, the on call doctor, then it's a whole runaround. But the system is good because it keeps whoever, that way you're not necessarily always have to be reachable 365 days a year. But one thing I will say I do that, again, I think it's just the right thing to do and patients appreciate it, is anybody that I do any kind of complicated surgery on, or any kind of that has any kind of tenuous thing going on with their eye, I just will always just give them my personal cell phone number. I don't think many doctors do that, but it just makes it easier they feel like they're being cared for, like you said. And then if they need actual care, I know what's going on. They don't have to call the answering service. The answering service gets them in touch with some other doctor that has no idea what's really going on with them. And it's just easier. So that's one of the things when you were mentioning about kind of extra care and going the extra mile. That's now that can, you were asking about stories and such that can lead. I remember, for example, it's been a while now, but when I was engaged, or I think I had just been married with my wife, and I had a lady who was probably 78, 82, somewhere in there. And a very nice lady, but she lived by herself. She was in a wheelchair, and she had originally had eye issues, but now her eye issues were better. But of course, she had my cell phone number. And
and the dating services weren't working so well for her, so she
correct.
figured
You
I'll
can
give
see
Abe a
where
couple
you
of
can see you can see where this story's going exactly. So, it was at least 3 or 4 nights a week for a month or two, that at around midnight, every 3 or 4 times a week, she would call. I'd be, oh yeah, Miss So and So, yeah, how's it going? Is your eye doing okay? I mean, it's the same conversation almost
right.
every time. Is your eye? Oh yeah, no, my eye's feeling better. I just wanted to call, see how you're doing, see what you're up to. How are you? What are you watching? The Tonight Show tonight? Are you watching? See what she just wanted to talk. And
Well,
suffice to say, it got old a little bit. People would tell me, I should just change my
or you block her. No, you could block
See, I don't
because
know if I could in those days. I don't know. And
right
I don't know if
now you can't
nowadays you
block them.
probably could. In those
So Abe,
days, so
I have a couple of thoughts with what you just said. I figure the reason why you gave your phone number out is that if you didn't do a good job and she couldn't see, she would never be able to pick your number out of the phone, so she wouldn't be
that
calling
too.
you, and anyone that you did it properly wouldn't need you. So you figure nobody's going to call you. That's just me thinking. So, um,
You're a smart guy. You've
but
always been a smart guy, and yet there's more proof right there. Yeah,
that's
yeah,
always I was
yeah.
no pre-med. As they say at WashU, the business school was preschool. But, I think I mentioned I'm writing a book. And so I do have a chapter of somebody who constantly called me, constantly left me messages. But mine is actually, I almost named my podcast after what she left me. This one woman left me. It's going to be the name of the chapter, but she basically said, and another thing, fatso, was what she left me. And it's recorded. And actually, my kids are dying. My family dies when they hear it. And and actually, I think I end that chapter of the book exact word for word of what the message. It was a
Terrible.
transcription of her message. So
Terrible.
hopefully
No.
you save some of those because
Oh
that
yeah.
might. Yeah.
Some people you
So
just can't, you do everything you can. It reminds me of my very first year, when I was an attending surgeon after having gone through all my training, right? And I'm working for a guy who's more of a senior guy. He brings me in as the junior guy, right? So he goes away on vacation for a little while. So I'm busy seeing all these different patients in the office, a lot of his, frankly, too, since he's away on vacation and I'm still building up things. So all of a sudden, one of my assistants calls me out of the room and says, "Hey, Dr. Kaplan, there's a patient on the phone, needs to talk to you about an issue." So this ends up being a lady a nice older lady who was one of my partners, the senior partner, his patient, right? So I want to be extra nice and good. I mean, I'm nice anyway, but especially since
right,
it's like his patient, I try. So usually you get these calls are asking, yeah, did they mean for my eye drops to be 3 times a day or 4 times a day? And it's a quick, yes, this, that, she had me on the phone for 20, 30 minutes, all these other patients of mine in all the rooms. They're peeking their head out. Where's Dr. Kaplan? When's he coming back? I'm sweating, I'm answering all this lady's questions. Every side, I mean, and they were all medical questions. It wasn't,
right.
am I watching the Tonight Show tonight? They were legit questions, but I mean, she kept going, 20, 30 minutes later. So finally, I feel so good about things. And it's at the end of the call. And I'm like, okay, well, did I answer all your questions well, dear? I hope I did everything okay for you, dear. And she said, oh yeah, you answered everything quite nicely for me, Dr. Kaplan. But just so you know, I'm not your dear, so please don't call me dear. And she hung up the phone. So after all, that was like the last impression I made on her
Did,
was that
did she ever bring that up or no? She
I
never.
never
She
saw her. I did not, it
It wasn't
wasn't
like
my
there was like
patient.
you didn't have
So
like a
I have no idea if she told that to the other senior partner or not, but that after the whole time, 20, 30 minutes of holding her hand, that was like the last little take home message. Yeah.
but it's interesting because that
Uh,
is like you're dealing with people, right? And so do you normally call people dear? Probably not. And
yeah.
it was probably a while ago. And
First of
it's
all, that
like
was like 20 years ago. Yeah, it's a
and you were
different
beaten
time.
down. You were beaten down from a 30-minute phone call.
Yeah, and it's like, and you think of it, I don't know, maybe I'm showing how too old fashioned I am or what have you, but here I was like, a 30-year-old guy talking to a 70 or 80-year-old on the phone, and I thought I'm
Right,
being nice and polite. I didn't really know her name or remember her name. I said,
right.
okay, thank you, dear. I hope that was so. Anyway,
I've had real estate agents who I guess are older than me call me dear. And it's like you just let things go, right? Like it's
right,
because again, it's about the relationships. But it is pretty funny that like even if that offended her a little bit, you spent all this time with
right,
her, and it
right.
was like sometimes you just got to let something go. But
So
again, you're the face of when you're in front of the patient. Again, just patients can have they're at the doctor, maybe it's a real the surgery, they're stressed, they're nervous, other things are going on in people's lives, so a lot of times it's not even anything to do with us. And as you know, there are people, that's why they come up with the name of Karen, right? So a Karen is somebody that's always complaining about stuff. So
correct.
at some point you try to do the best. All you can do is be the best Abe Kaplan. And I can be the
Yeah,
best Daniel Berger. That's
that's
all
all
we
you can
try to
do.
do,
Yeah.
and go from there. I had an interesting story. So I just the other day there was some water issues in our town, and the government's actually was offering some people to buy their houses. And I worked with a family. She had actually been in our school district, and they're very old. They called me to sell their house. I'm like, I can't sell your house because you're in this flood zone and you need to get into this program where the government could buy it. And they were like, they didn't want to do it. I There was like a 1 week extension. I got them all the information. I got information from the village to explain to them. I ended up getting them in the program. They just sold the house last week, and she sent me. And it was like since the government bought it, there was no money, right? It was just like I did what I felt I needed to do for them. They're elderly people. And this is probably the money that was there is they don't have big 401ks or whatever. This is a lot of their money. And so the closing happened, was basically that the government gave them the money. And then she sent me a note last night, and there's money inside. And I was like, oh my God. And so I wanted to call her, like in her, I think she's 80. And I called, or 70, 78 or something. And I called her. I wanted to personally call her to thank her for her note and thank her for giving me anything. She didn't have to. Did I spend a lot of time? Yes. But you know what? She didn't need to do anything. And she was like, she called it a token. And I'm like, that's not a token. It was over $1,000, right?
Oh
So
my.
I was like, that's not a token. I go, that's a legitimate gift. And she kept on trying to explain why it could have been more if I was, and I go, I think this, I was like, you know what? I did it because it made me feel better. It made me feel good that I was
Right.
able to help
There
you. And
you
she's like,
go.
oh my God. So she's always said you're a godsend and you're going to be looked upon and thank you. And it was just like, you know, that you do things like that, right? Where it's like, I didn't do it for the money. She
Yeah.
gave me a gift because she wanted to. And she was trying to minimize the gift. And I was like, no, please, I was like, don't minimize the gift. And so that's all you really can do, right? So it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I have to, just like me, I'm always on. Oh, so one other thing I forgot to say with the person that was calling you so late. Why didn't you give her the Danny talk? The Danny talk is like, listen, you're in New York, I'm in Chicago. I have to be on call. No late texts. Like my whole phone goes up and they get woken up. And I got a couple, I probably every now and then mistakes are made, but I've tried to become a better friend, Abe, right? I'm like, oh, I'm sending this to Abe. So what I'll do now is I'll sometimes email stuff because email I can send 24/7. It's not a problem.
Right.
So that was the other thing you could have done. You could have put her on notice that she's not allowed to call and text you. No late text.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I learned that. So, but my phone goes off really late because obviously different people are on different shifts and things like that. So you're giving your phone number out. You're making yourself available. And like you said, it's probably more than many doctors don't do that. But I have doctors that give me their phone number, and I am so like I will do whatever I can to help grow their business. If I have a golf day, I have an extra person. I want to do or I have tickets to like the tennis, or because it's like they're making themselves available to me, which it makes me feel special,
Yeah.
and I want to thank people. So I think I'm assuming you're touching a lot of people's lives just by giving them the ability to know that if something goes wrong, they can
Right.
quickly text you and get an answer.
Yeah. And people don't take advantage of it. I mean, that's why that one story stood out so much because there's hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of people that have my patients of mine that have my number now. And like you said, to them, it's just like an insurance policy. It's just peace of mind to know that if they have an issue, they can reach me if need be. But they're not going to take advantage of that. In fact, it kind of almost makes them less, in a way, less likely to contact me because they know they're kind of intruding on it's not just calling the office and getting who's on call. They're actually intruding on my personal time, so they're going
Right.
to think twice and only call if it really is something warranting it. And so it works out well.
So obviously over the last couple of years, this has been a thing called the pandemic, which was obviously it affected the world, but it also affected you personally. And because of you, so the other thing that I learned, because we were always trying to stay communicating, is that I think a lot of this, so the Wuhan thing, wasn't it basically like an eye dot, wasn't it something with an eye dot where it actually started basically, or at least,
Apparently
right?
it was an ophthalmologist in China that was seeing the very first signs of these very odd conditions in people's eyes that were unusual, and he kind of pieced together that it was likely some kind of weird new virus going around, and supposedly he tried to actually make that known to the government, and they didn't want to hear anything about that. And in fact, unfortunately, he actually passed away from COVID himself. So yeah, very sad. But yes, that was the very first signs of COVID. Yeah.
Well, because you're like saying you're basically in someone's like you're in someone's grill,
Yeah.
right? During procedures and examinations, so that if you can't, it's almost impossible for you to even prevent yourself from
Right.
getting right infected.
Yep. Very hard. So yeah, we would put masks on all the time during COVID, and even long after, up until a year ago or so, our office was where we were requiring masks. Yeah. So now finally we're past that, thank goodness. And but
But that was
it,
never something that was ever really discussed in, I mean, what was discussed in medical school about infectious diseases? You probably touched on it a little bit, but I'm assuming nothing at all extensive as
nothing
what
like
this
that.
turned into.
No, nothing like that at all. Nope, nope. And
As a doctor, I'm hopeful you believe in science. You believe in science, and
that is for sure. Yes.
okay,
Yep.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's amazing the things, right, that you can like tell me some of the things that, as an ophthalmologist, some of the things that you're able to do now that weren't even 20 years ago even available.
Great question. So, like now, a lot of the stuff I do nowadays is in terms of procedures. I do a lot of cataract surgeries on older folks that develop what's called cataracts in their eyes. And the technology now has gotten to the point where we can not only make it so cataract surgery is where in the middle of one's eye is what we call the lens of the eye, and it acts kind of like a contact lens, excuse me, built into one's eye. It's about the size and shape of an M&M or a Skittles. When that clear contact gets cloudy as we get older, it happens to everybody that lives long enough gets cataracts. So you kind of want to get them. The only people that don't get them don't live long enough to get them. So when it gets cloudy like that, it's like wearing a dirty contact lens. So even in the beginning of my training and my years as a practicing ophthalmologist, we've had the ability to do cataract surgery to remove the cloudy lens out of the eye, put a new plastic lens back in its place to give people back the clarity of their vision again. What we've really got better at over time now is it was kind of a given in a way that people would have to still need full-time glasses after their cataract surgery back 20 years ago. We've gotten way better now with the technology to do little tricks during the surgery where it's like vision correction at the same time that we do the cataract surgery, so that we can really make it so that a great many people are able to just be glasses free if that's something they pursue and desire to do. So that's one of the biggest
So is a
change.
cataract similar to headlights of a car, where as the car gets older, it gets like
Right.
cloudy and that similar?
Very similar to that. Yeah. Yeah.
And then how popular is like LASIK surgery, right? That's where that's
Uh-huh.
different. That's more
That's
like
different. That's shaping the front surface of the eye to get out of glasses. But what we can do nowadays is so one of the ways we can get people during their cataract surgery to not need glasses so much is we can almost do kind of like a similar to a LASIK surgery on their eye at the same time while they're getting the cataract surgery. That's in the last like 10 years or so. That's become really more and more popular. LASIK surgery itself is always still a popular thing, but it was extremely popular when it came out in the around the late 90s to early 2000s because there were so many people that had never had access to it because it's a brand new thing. So all the people initially got it and made the spike up, the popularity. And then since then, it's just kind of stayed at a steady, even keel since then.
and I think you've done that for some sports athletes, right? So it's like you're in there doing LASIK. You got to make sure that you're not screwing it up because they're going to come after you. They're going to be like,
We're
I used to be number 72 in the world and I'm now 92. What happened? And you're like,
right,
it's because your putting's not that good.
which they can blame on me, though. Yeah, which they can blame on me. I have done different procedures on different athletes. There was a guy that now that we're getting into football season, this was a different kind of procedure, but there was a guy, I do a lot of eyelid procedures as well, functional as well as cosmetic. There was a ex Chicago Bear player.
Was he a
Yeah.
part of was he in the Super Bowl shuffle?
He was around that time. I can't
Okay.
get into anything, but he
I
was
know.
around that time. So,
I'm just trying to show you the end of the
but I'm
Super Bowl
impressed that you
shuffle,
remember that.
19,
I'm impressed.
1986.
I'm impressed because it was 1 year before your Giants won. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So this guy does a foot, now that it was right around this time of year, a few years ago, that this guy does like a pregame, postgame Bears kind of show. I don't believe he does now. This was about 5-6 years ago. Okay. So I can stay, so people won't be able to figure it out too
It's
badly.
not Walter Payton.
It's not Walt. No, well, unfortunately, he's
I,
passed away, so it's
I
not
know,
him.
I know,
But no,
I
this
know.
is somebody who is about 6'6", about 350 pounds, and very personable guy. But so, and anyway, so he comes in, he's got this big bump on his eyelid, and he's telling me it's about this time of year. He's like, "Hey, Dr. Kaplan, in a couple weeks, the season's going to start. I can't have this bump on TV when I'm about to be doing pregame and postgame stuff." So I was like, okay, yeah, we can get rid of that. And, for most people, I do this kind of stuff right in the office. We don't need you to have any like put under for any anesthesia. It's just something we do in the office. I do have to give you a injection of numbing into the lid first. And then once that sinks in, we'll lay you back in the exam room in the chair and we'll cut it out and make it look pretty and you'll be good in 2 weeks. So he comes back in on the day. And again, we got a very busy waiting room of patients, and all the different rooms are all filled with people. And I do this in the office, even frankly, on people as young as about 15, even if they feel like they can tolerate. It's about a 5 seconds of having to tolerate a shot in the eyelid. So suffice to say, so we lean him back. I'm getting him cleaned, getting ready to do the injection. Again, 6'5", 350-pound Bears lineman, right, from the 80s. Suffice to say, I give him the injection, and as I'm giving him the injection, he screams so loud that the entire office, everybody, I have my assistants running in, opening up the door. Dr. Kaplan's everything okay? What's going on? I hear this girl running. The whole rest of the afternoon, even I have other patients that I'm then going to see. Oh my God, was that person okay? I heard this guy screaming next door. I heard it. Anyway, it worked out beautifully, and he was fine on TV. Everything worked out fine. But it's definitely one of those, I don't know, ironies or whatever you want to say, that this big hulking 6'5", 350-pound guy was like screaming the most for this procedure. So
I've had a lot
he
of
ended up, but he worked out fine. He did great.
I've had 2 root canals this year, so I really don't like those things. But and my root canals actually, my endodontist actually gives me her cell phone number. And I love that about her, 100,
Yeah,
because I get like this electronic shocking stuff where she's basically said I'm one of her worst 5 patients for pain, not like
really.
and what's in yes, and I get this electrical stuff where they have to block it multiple different places. But what's amazing is that she is so empathetic to my pain, where I really believe that. And I'm like, I thank you, but I know that you're trying to give me as much painkiller in different places, but I know that she doesn't mean it, and that she didn't. It just physiology, right? It just that's the
Yeah,
way my mouth is. But I
right.
guess it's good if you're going to do something. Be the top 5 is not a bad thing to do. Where I'm her top 5 worst patients ever, not of
Well, but
patient,
also
but
that
of pain.
it's only the tough kind of football player types that somehow get the most pain. So that's you then. There you
But
go.
but
There
you
you
have
go.
like I
So,
can't even. I'm not wearing glasses now, but I wear glasses. I can't even put like when I need. I've talked to you about some redness in my eye, and you're like, you need to put these eye drops in, and then you're like, pat a day, and like I listen to you, Abe, and I can't even put in like drops. There's just certain things like the
yeah.
eye. That's like the eyes, right? If it was, I'm on Ozempic or I'm on Wegovy. Actually, I shoot myself every week in my leg. It's no big deal. I can't even put an eye drop in, and let alone the stuff that you talk about. It's just insane because it's the eye, and so you've
There's
chosen an interesting part of the body.
That's for sure. There's even a lot of other doctors, believe it or not, that feel that way about the eye. I remember, again, it reminds me of a story of my very first day of being an attending doctor, meaning after all the training's done and I get the job with a guy that I was on the phone with his patient on my very first day on that job. And I've got my white coat on and I'm
It's
clean. and it's got my name on there. And I went to the security office to get a badge with my name, and then it says like ophthalmology on it and my picture on there. And I'm walking around in the hospital there, and I get in the elevator, and I'll never forget this other lady doctor is on the elevator, and she extends her hand. She's like, "Oh, you must be a new doctor here." I was like, "Oh yeah, Dr. Kaplan, nice to meet you." And she's like, "Oh, that's cool. So what kind of doctor are you?" And she looks at my badge and she said, "Oh, wait. Oh, you're an ophthalmologist. Oh, you're an eye surgeon. Ew, you touch people's eyeballs." And this is another doctor telling me, "You touch people's eyeballs?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's what I do." And I was like, "Well, what are you doing?" And I mean, it's almost like out of like a comedy, right? So I look at her, I'm like, "Oh, OB-GYN. Okay. All right. Well, nice to meet you. Nice to," and like, she's like, it was just
She delivers babies, right? You're
a
just touching
unique
people's
experience.
eyeballs.
If she thought what I was doing was like gross, let's leave it at
Right.
that. But
So,
yeah.
well, yeah,
So,
again, I think clearly you have a lot more training than me as a real estate agent. I just got old and I was like, let me do this. I got something to do when I get older. But in the end of the day, it's about treating people respectfully. I try to build a business the way that I would want to be treated if I was a client or if I was an agent in my office. And it seems as though that you've built a practice where if it was your kids, your parents, your
that's
relatives,
it.
that you would be like, I'm going to be personal. I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to help you out as best as I can and give you all the information and make myself available. So I think, in
Yeah.
essence, we both found our way in different professions of how are you, like, you're still Abe. I mean, from 1987, you're still the same guy. And I believe I'm still the same,
You are. You
I'm
are.
still
You got a
me.
beard now, but
I
otherwise,
do
yeah.
have a bit,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
although I might have had some facial hair one of the years, but ultimately it's amazing that we're able to, after all these years, to get on a Zoom, right, and do a podcast.
I love it.
And it's like we're back in 1989, or you graduated in 1990, right? So it was
Yep. Yep.
1990. It's no different.
Yeah.
And again, it's just being who you are, and we just get older, have families, and all that other stuff now. But ultimately, it's still the same people, which I think is a
It,
kind of a cool thing.
it's very
So.
cool. And what you
So
were saying, really, in a nutshell, as corny as it is, the golden rule is really what it's all about. I'm sure the way you treat the clients that you have, would you be comfortable putting your own parents or your siblings in a home like this, or what kind of deal they're getting? And I feel the same way. People always ask me, "Well, what do you think? Should I get this surgery or that surgery, or should I do it this way or that way?" Or they come to me, and I was like, I can't tell you for sure, but what I can honestly tell you is, if you were my mother or my father or my wife, I do think this would be the way to go. And many times that sometimes doesn't even entail me being the one.
right, or it's doing nothing. You're like, I wouldn't do
Right.
any. I don't think you should do
Correct.
anything, even though.
Correct.
So
You got to be able to have a good conscience at the end of the day. Sleep
listen,
well
at
at
the
night,
end
as
of the
they
night,
say.
when the end of the night, you have to be able to put your head on the pillow and know that
Right.
you're going to get a good night's sleep, except
Right.
if I text you at 2 in the morning.
Correct.
Right?
Exactly.
Then you're like, oh well, but that was
Exactly.
because of me, not because of you. So
That's it.
exactly. So thank you, Abe, Dr. Abe Kaplan. You're just a genuine. You're still as genuine as you were as I first met you, as we were driving around in the older Cadillac with the dice in it, and just listening to tunes and finding our own adventures, which is what we
Yeah.
started. You taught me that the adventure is, get the journey is so much more, the whole journey, not just the end
Yeah.
game. And I learned that from you. I try to keep that with me. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you
Um,
so much. It's a
s-
great
s-
pleasure, Dan. Yep.
so thanks for this has been Daniel Berger with the Adventures of a Real Estate Broker. Thank you very much. Until we meet again. Thanks for joining me on the Adventures of a Real Estate Broker. I hope you enjoyed our time together as much as I did. If you laughed, learned something, or just had a good time, do yourself a favor and subscribe to the podcast. A big shout out to our sponsor, RE/MAX Prestige Properties, for making this all possible. Remember to leave a review if you enjoyed the show. It helps more people find us. Until next time, keep it real, keep it fun, and keep exploring the adventures in your neighborhood. I'm Daniel Berger, your New York realtor, and I'll see you in the next episode.